welcome to the deep dive. Today we're going to do something really fascinating. We're stepping into a different version of reality. It's a counterfactual, what-if scenario to explore just how profoundly a single choice, a fundamental choice made decades ago, could have reshaped the world you live in today.
That's right. We're basing this deep dive on some, pretty intriguing analysis from Nueconomy, looking at a specific fork in the road,
Yeah.
one that appeared around 1990.
And the big question, the central what-if for this dive is, what if, instead of relentlessly prioritizing efficiency, above almost everything else in our global supply chains, what if resilience, that just-in-case way of thinking, had actually won out over just-in-time?
It's like the complete opposite of the path we actually took, isn't it?
Exactly.
The path of lean manufacturing, the laser focus on speed, cutting costs, and, ultimately concentrating production in just a few cheaper places.
Yeah, exactly. So let's use this source material, this analysis, to step into an alternative 2025. Let's see how different things might look.
Okay.
Where should we start? How do we explore this?
Well, I think first let's ground ourselves in the world we actually know, the one built on efficiency.
Okay.
Nueconomy points to the rise of just-in-time JIT delivery as absolutely fundamental to our current reality.
And JIT, that wasn't exactly a brand new idea back then, right?
Yeah.
It had roots going way back.
Correct, yeah. The philosophy was really perfected at Toyota, Taiichi Ono, between, 1948 and 1975.
Right.
The core idea was, incredibly elegant in its simplicity. Making only what is needed, only when it is needed, and only in the amount that is needed.
So eliminate waste, minimize inventory, keep things lean.
Precisely. And that really went global, didn't it?
Yeah.
Especially hitting Western industry hard.
Yeah.
From the late 70s right through the 90s.
That was the big push.
Absolutely. You saw the lean manufacturing revolution really take hold. Consultancies, like McKinsey.
The big names.
They weren't just advising clients. They were preaching efficiency. Get rid of inventory, slash costs, optimize every single process for maximum speed.
And executives, well, they ate it up. Boasting about razor-thin margins became like the ultimate sign of a well-run company.
Which, as the analysis shows, naturally led to relying on single suppliers. I mean, if one place was cheapest, you went all in.
Makes sense from that perspective.
Putting all our eggs in one basket wasn't seen as a risk back then. It was just smart business for cutting costs.
And that's the strategy, really, that ultimately shaped the global manufacturing landscape we see today. Heavily concentrated in specific regions, optimized mostly for low costs.
Exactly. Now, let's use the source material to step into that other universe, the one where resilience came first.
Okay.
Imagine that fork in the road back around 1990, and businesses chose the other path.
So those same consultants, the McKinseys of that alternate world, what would their advice sound like?
Oh, totally different. Instead of eliminate all waste, their mantra would be something more like, keep enough inventory, enough redundant capacity to survive the unexpected.
Right.
The focus shifts completely from minimum cost to maximum robustness.
Okay, and the executives, what are they bragging about at the industry conferences in this world?
Definitely not thin margins. They'd be talking about their network, their multiple suppliers, how quickly they could shift production if something went wrong. The analysis suggests that phrase, all our eggs in one basket. It wouldn't just be frowned upon. It might be seen as a firing offense for someone managing supply chains.
Wow. So companies would be actively building and maintaining just-in-case reserves, stockpiles of components, finished goods, ready for, anything.
Exactly. Ready for disruptions, big ones, small ones. And these differences, they wouldn't just stay confined to boardrooms and warehouses. No. They would fundamentally change the world you live in as a consumer.
Okay, how would that feel to me then, shopping? Would things be cheaper because we're, more prepared?
The research is pretty clear on this. This resilient world isn't cheaper. Quite the opposite, actually.
Really?
Take something common, like your iPhone. In this counterfactual 2025, that phone might cost you, say, 2,000 pounds, not 1,000 pounds.
Double. Wow. Why so much more?
Well, building redundancy costs money.
Yeah.
Having backup suppliers, extra inventory lying around, alternative factories ready to go.
It's not free.
It's definitely not free.
Yeah.
You're paying 7 suppliers to make something, even if one is your main one, it's just inherently more expensive than only paying one.
Right. That makes sense.
And the analysis points out something interesting, like the fast fashion revolution.
Yeah.
Built entirely on speed, low cost, rapid turnover from really concentrated production. That likely wouldn't have happened. Not at the scale and speed we know anyway.
Why not?
Those higher base costs from maintaining diverse supplier networks would just make that super fast, super cheap model much less viable.
Okay, so things cost more. What about where things are actually made? Would that look different on a map?
Oh, profoundly different. Massively different. Instead of seeing one or two countries utterly dominate global manufacturing for, lots of product categories.
Like we see now.
Yeah, you'd have genuinely distributed production centers spread out.
Can you give me an example from the source? Like, how would the map change?
Sure. The research paints this picture where maybe Mexico is a major hub manufacturing electronics, specifically for the North American market.
Okay.
India might be doing the same for Europe, and perhaps Vietnam is handling production for Australia and Southeast Asia.
So regional hubs.
Kinda, yeah.
Yeah.
And corporate boardrooms wouldn't just have sales maps. They'd have maps that look more like military contingency plans.
Okay, so.
Clearly marking primary, secondary, maybe even tertiary production sites for critical goods. Plan A, Plan B, Plan C.
That visual is striking, like actual fallback plans built into the geography of production.
Exactly. And there's a great example in the source involving clothing production.
Okay.
A company like H&M, maybe they still have significant manufacturing in Bangladesh, right? But Bangladesh would just be one of maybe 7 countries.
7.
Yeah, 7 countries with established capacity, ready to surge production if needed.
So if there was a problem in Bangladesh.
Or even if workers just took a long holiday, the system has built-in flexibility on a national scale.
Okay, so how would this distributed approach affect jobs, particularly in places like the US or Europe that have seen a lot of manufacturing decline in our world?
That's a really remarkable story in this alternative world. The source suggests that the hollowing out of Western manufacturing capacity.
Yeah, which was huge.
It would have happened far more gradually, or perhaps wouldn't have gone nearly as far.
So places that used to be manufacturing powerhouses might still be making things significantly.
Quite possibly, yes. Detroit might still be making cars, not just for the U.S. market, maybe, but maintaining backup capacity that could swing into action for European or Asian markets if needed.
Interesting.
Sheffield, historically famous for its steel.
Right.
It could still be producing steel for global consumption, not just focusing on niche heritage products like cutlery.
So, okay, you're paying more for your goods as a consumer, but you might also have more job opportunities closer to home, potentially with better wages. Is that the trade-off?
That's exactly the trade-off. The analysis highlights higher consumer prices because of the cost of redundancy. Yeah. But potentially offset, at least somewhat, by higher employment and maybe better paying manufacturing jobs in developed countries.
Okay, let's dig into some of the maybe less obvious consequences. The source calls the implications for innovation deliciously counterintuitive. Why counterintuitive?
Well, it seems backward at first, doesn't it? You think if you're focused on efficiency, innovation drives down cost. That's the link.
Right.
But the argument here is, well, when you can't compete purely on cost because you've deliberately built in extra cost through redundancy, you have to compete on other factors. You're forced to.
Like what then?
Quality, design, technology, features. The analysis suggests something like German engineering.
Yeah, the cliche.
It wouldn't just be a cliche in this world. It would be a strategic necessity, like absolutely vital for survival in that competitive landscape.
And innovation itself, the process, might look different too.
Yes, potentially more distributed. Think about it. When you aren't solely reliant on one single low-cost supplier somewhere far away,
You invest more broadly.
you invest much more heavily in developing suppliers everywhere. You have to.
Oh.
Which means technological advances, new ideas, innovative solutions could emerge from multiple centers all around the world, rather than being concentrated in just, Silicon Valley or Shenzhen.
Okay, what about the environment? The source calls the impact a fascinating paradox. How can having more factories in more places possibly be good for the environment?
Well, it's not entirely good. That's the paradox bit.
Yeah.
On the negative side, yeah, multiple production sites mean more duplicated infrastructure.
More concrete, more energy.
Exactly. And potentially more overall transportation mileage if goods are crisscrossing the globe between all these different sites during production.
That makes intuitive sense. More stuff moving around.
But the analysis also points to potential positives. You could actually have shorter average shipping distances for the final delivery to the consumer.
Because production is closer to the end markets.
Precisely. And you might reduce the overall reliance on those giant container ships traversing oceans, which are, let's face it, significant polluters.
Right.
So the source poses the question, could overall production in this resilient world have actually been cleaner?
And the answer.
It suggests, quite possibly, a really complex trade-off, not a simple answer.
Okay. Let's talk money, finance. How would the financial world look different?
Oh, entirely different. Concepts like supply chain finance.
Which is huge now.
Huge. It's built entirely on financing goods while they're in transit, basically to optimize cash flow in these super lean, just-in-time systems. That just wouldn't exist in the same way, or certainly not on the same scale.
Why not? Because companies wouldn't be desperately trying to get inventory off their books and turn it into cash or finance assets so quickly.
Exactly. They'd be holding actual physical inventory, seeing it as a strategic asset, not a liability to be minimized at all costs.
So balance sheets would look different.
Totally. The analysis suggests corporate balance sheets in this alternative world would look positively antiquated to our modern eyes.
Antiquated how?
They'd show significant physical assets like big piles of inventory, rather than the highly optimized sort of asset-light cash conversion cycles that are favored today. More stuff, less financial engineering.
Okay, last big difference area, geopolitics. How does this fundamental shift towards resilience affect global power dynamics?
Profoundly is the word the source uses. Profoundly. Economic interdependence would still exist, of course.
Can't avoid that entirely.
No, but it would be far less concentrated, much more spread out.
Meaning no single country has quite all the leverage.
Precisely. No single country could effectively hold the global economy hostage by controlling a key supply chain choke point for essential goods.
Because the capacity is elsewhere, too.
Because production capacity is genuinely distributed across multiple regions. So a disruption in one area, even a major one, wouldn't cripple the entire global system in the same devastating way it can now.
And how does that play into things like trade disputes or trade wars?
Well, the analysis suggests it would make them much more difficult to weaponize.
Harder to use trade as a weapon.
Yeah. If production isn't concentrated in just one or two specific places that you can target, then imposing tariffs or restrictions on one location just doesn't cut off global supplies effectively.
The economic leverage is diluted.
Exactly. It's diminished quite significantly.
Wow. This has been a really fascinating journey into that alternative reality. Let's bring it back to the world we actually live in right now.
Okay.
Think about a major disruption we've all experienced recently, like, well, COVID-19.
Right. In that resilient, just-in-case world we just explored, a pandemic like COVID-19, it just wouldn't have triggered the same kind of widespread crises. Not for supply chains.
Really?
The research suggests it would have been viewed as, quote, merely another test of your contingency planning rather than an existential crisis for many businesses and governments.
Because the system was built for shocks.
Your systems were designed to handle shocks. It was part of the plan.
And the source has such a relatable, almost comical example.
Get toilet paper.
The toilet paper shortages in that resilient world with strategic bathroom tissue reserves spread across multiple continents, multiple production sites.
Impossible. That specific absurdity just wouldn't have happened. You'd have your backup supplies.
It really highlights what the analysis calls the cruel irony, doesn't it? We might have achieved the genuine supply chain security that policymakers today are desperately seeking.
Spending fortunes trying to build now.
Right. Simply by never abandoning that old just-in-case approach that just-in-time basically replaced decades ago.
We traded resilience for short-term efficiency gains.
And the costs of not being resilient are now painfully clear. The source even references current research, even from places like McKinsey.
The original champions of efficiency.
Exactly. Acknowledging that companies today face disruptions that erase half a year's profits or more, it says a single prolonged shock to production can wipe out 30 to 50% of 1 year's earnings. Huge numbers.
It really drives home the source's central point, doesn't it? Perhaps the most efficient path, at least in that narrow sense of lowest short-term cost.
Yeah.
Wasn't actually the wisest path. Not for long-term stability, not for security, maybe not even for overall economic health when you factor in the cost of these disruptions.
So we've taken this deep dive into a world where resilience was prioritized over pure efficiency. We saw, okay, higher consumer costs,
Definitely.
but potentially more distributed jobs, a totally different manufacturing map, maybe surprisingly more innovation in some ways.
Yeah, that counterintuitive point.
A complex environmental picture, balance sheets that look, well, antiquated. full of actual stuff.
And a much more balanced, maybe less volatile geopolitical landscape.
Nueconomy's analysis uses this really powerful what if, this counterfactual, to make us question our assumptions, to challenge what we think we know about what's truly efficient or wise in the long run.
And it leaves you, the listener, with this provocative thought to chew on. Given the immense and very real costs of disruption that we've experienced in recent years, cost and product availability, economic stability, even national security, what is the true cost of building that resilience back in?
And maybe more importantly,
Yeah.
are we as a society actually willing to pay that upfront cost now for that long-term stability? What does thinking about this what if, this alternative path, make you think about the choices we've already made as a global economy and maybe the choices we still need to make going forward?